Rain lashed against the windshield as Evelyn gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles white, her heart pounding faster than the wipers could clear the storm. The world outside blurred into streaks of gray and silver, but the clock on the dashboard glared in cruel clarity. 11:52. The ceremony had started 2 minutes ago. 2 minutes. She whispered a prayer that red lights would turn green, that the traffic would move, that somehow time might forgive her, just this once. Beside her, the wedding invitation lay crumpled and damp on the passenger seat. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Lydia Carter and Daniel Hayes." The words were elegant, embossed in gold, now smudged by tears. Evelyn brushed her thumb over her daughter's name, tracing the letters as if touching Lydia herself could stop the ache in her chest. She had promised she would be there. She had meant it with every fiber of her being, but promises, she'd learned, were fragile things. Too easy to make, too easy to break. When she finally turned onto the street where the church stood, her breath caught. Cars lined both sides of the road, their windshields glinting in the rain. She parked half a block away, the downpour soaking her before she could even close the door. Her heels slipped on the wet pavement as she ran, clutching her small purse, her dress clinging to her legs. The bells began to ring, slow and solemn, echoing through the storm. Each toll seemed to remind her how late she was, not just for the wedding, but for years of moments she had missed. By the time she reached the steps of the church, her chest burned from the run. The grand wooden doors loomed ahead, carved and heavy, muffling the music inside. Evelyn hesitated, rain dripping from her hair onto her trembling hands. Through the crack between the doors, she could see flashes of white and gold, the glow of candles, the shimmer of satin. The sound of a violin floated out, sweet and tender, and then, through the glass panels, she saw her daughter. Lydia was radiant. Her veil glimmered under the chandeliers as she walked down the aisle, her arm linked with Grace's husband, who had stepped in to give her away. The smile on her face was soft, serene, unburdened. Evelyn's breath hitched. That seat in the front row, the one reserved for mother of the bride, stood empty, a single white rose resting on it. A gesture of forgiveness, maybe, or a reminder. Evelyn pressed her palm against the glass. Her reflection merged with the image inside. Lydia's joy, Daniel's teary grin, the guests rising to their feet. Laughter filled the air, bright and full, muffled only by the rain between them. It was the sound of a life moving forward, a sound she had longed to be part of. But she couldn't move. Her feet felt anchored to the cold stone beneath her. The storm outside roared, wind whipping through her soaked hair. Yet she felt numb, like time had stopped just for her. Inside, the priest's voice carried through the doors. "If anyone knows of any reason why these two should not be joined..." A bitter smile tugged at Evelyn's lips. How she wished she had any reason, any power, to turn back time. But she didn't. All she had was the weight of her absence, pressing heavy on her heart. When the applause came, wild and joyful, Evelyn turned away. Her heels clicked softly on the wet stone as she descended the steps, the church bells still ringing behind her. Every peal echoed through her chest, a cruel symphony of joy and loss. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The sound of their happiness without her followed her into the storm, breaking her in ways silence never could. And as the rain washed down her face, she whispered into the wind, "I'm sorry, Lydia. I'm so sorry." The laughter drifted through the heavy oak doors like sunlight leaking through a crack. It was soft at first. Muffled giggles, the sound of happiness blooming inside the church. But soon it swelled into applause, echoing across the stone steps where Evelyn stood drenched and trembling. She closed her eyes, gripping the handle of her purse as though it could hold her together. Every cheer from within seemed to strike her like a hammer, deliberate and unrelenting. She could picture it all in perfect, cruel clarity. Lydia and Daniel standing before the altar, hands entwined, the priest's final words still hanging in the air. Daniel would lift the veil, tenderly brushing a strand of hair from Lydia's face. The guests would rise, their smiles bright and genuine. And then the kiss, the room erupting in joy. That sound, the one that now tore through Evelyn's chest. She pressed her back against the cold wall of the church, her breath uneven. The world inside was full of laughter, of beginnings, of belonging. The world outside, the one she had built for herself, was nothing but rain and silence. She could almost hear herself clapping in her imagination, see herself standing there, proud and tearful, her heart full instead of empty. But reality was merciless. In truth, her hands were cold, still, useless things. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if Lydia would turn, just once, searching for her in the crowd. If she would glance toward the empty chair with the white rose and understand that her mother had tried, that she had fought time and traffic and all her own fears just to be near her. But Evelyn knew better. Lydia had stopped looking for her a long time ago. The applause turned to music, something bright and romantic. The church doors shuddered slightly with the bass of celebration, as though mocking the quiet stillness on the other side. Evelyn took a step back. The rain had eased to a drizzle, the street shining under the gray afternoon light. She thought of staying, of waiting until the reception, maybe slipping in quietly, pretending she'd been there all along. But what would be worse? Arriving late and uninvited, or being seen as the mother who missed it all? Her heels clicked sharply on the pavement as she turned away. The sound was rhythmic, precise, each step like a clock ticking against her regrets. Tick. You missed her vows. Tick. You missed her first dance. Tick. You missed her life. The wind tugged at her hair, and somewhere inside another round of laughter rose. She swallowed hard, feeling it pierce through her ribs like glass. As she reached the end of the street, she stopped. A memory stirred, one she hadn't visited in years. Lydia at 6, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor, crayons scattered everywhere. "Mommy, look! I made our family," she had said proudly, holding up a drawing of 3 stick figures under a crooked sun. Evelyn remembered the phone pressed between her shoulder and ear, the buzz of her boss's voice demanding numbers and deadlines. "Just a minute, sweetheart," she had murmured, scribbling notes on a legal pad. "I'll look later," but later never came. The drawing had sat on the coffee table until Lydia tucked it into a drawer herself. Evelyn couldn't even remember the colors. Were the lines happy yellow or lonely gray? She would never know. Now, as the rain began again, that forgotten moment returned in full color. A child's small voice, a missed glance, a promise postponed until it withered away. That's how it had always been. Tiny absences, one after another, like raindrops carving valleys into stone. A final cheer burst from the church behind her, loud and jubilant. Evelyn closed her eyes, whispering to the air, "That's what happiness sounds like." Her lips trembled around the words. She stood there a moment longer, drenched in memory, before finally walking away. The laughter faded behind her, replaced by the steady rhythm of her footsteps. Soft, lonely echoes swallowed by the rain. The house greeted Evelyn with silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that settles thickly in corners and clings to the walls like dust. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and the echo of it rang louder than it should have. The air was still, heavy with the faint scent of old lavender and forgotten meals. Somewhere, a clock ticked in the distance, a steady, indifferent reminder that time kept moving, even when she wished it wouldn't. Her heels clicked softly on the wooden floor as she walked through the hallway. Everything looked exactly as she had left it. The umbrella stand by the door, the worn coat she hadn't worn in years, the mail piled untouched on the console table. She passed the living room, and her gaze caught the photographs lining the mantel. Lydia's life, framed in moments Evelyn could barely remember being part of. There was Lydia at her high school graduation, cap tilted, smile bright as sunlight. Evelyn remembered the rush to get there, the phone call from work that had delayed her just long enough to miss the speech. She had arrived in time for the photos, smiling beside her daughter, pretending nothing was wrong. Another picture, Lydia's 10th birthday, a blur of candles and frosting. Evelyn had promised a weekend trip, but canceled at the last minute because of a critical project. She'd sent flowers instead. The photo captured Lydia's smile, but Evelyn knew now it was one of those smiles kids wear to hide disappointment. She turned away from the mantel, unable to bear the frozen cheer of those frames. The kitchen light flickered when she switched it on. She poured herself a glass of wine, cheap, red, and harsh on the tongue, and carried it to the living room. Her eyes landed on a cardboard box shoved beneath the coffee table. The label was fading but still legible. Lydia's childhood. Evelyn hesitated, fingers trembling around the glass. That box had been sitting there for years, untouched, a relic of innocence she hadn't earned the right to revisit. She set the wine aside and pulled the box toward her. The tape peeled back with a dry rip, the sound startling in the quiet room. Inside lay fragments of a little girl's world, a crayon drawing of a house with 3 smiling figures and a sun so big it nearly filled the page. A handful of old-school ribbons, spelling bee runner-up, perfect attendance, best smile. Evelyn smiled bitterly. She couldn't even remember attending those ceremonies. Beneath the papers was an envelope, yellowed at the edges. Her name scrawled across it in a child's careful handwriting. Mommy. Evelyn's chest tightened as she unfolded the paper inside. Dear Mommy, please don't miss my play again. I practiced so hard and I want you to see me. It's about a princess who finds her mom. I'll be the princess. Love, Lydia. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She pressed the letter against her chest, rocking slightly, as if cradling a ghost. The wine sat forgotten on the table, its deep red catching the lamplight like spilled guilt. Evelyn sank onto the couch, the letter trembling in her hands. The ticking clock filled the silence again, steady and merciless. She thought of every time she had said, "Next time later, I'll make it up to you." But time didn't wait for apologies. It just moved forward, carrying everything she missed farther and farther away. The shadows deepened as evening settled, and for a moment she thought she heard laughter, Lydia's childhood laughter, bouncing off the walls. But when she looked up, there was only the soft hum of the refrigerator and the sigh of an old house. She let her head fall back against the couch, whispering into the emptiness, "I was late for everything." The words hung in the air, fragile and final before dissolving into silence. And in that silence, Evelyn realized the cruelest part of all. The house wasn't empty because Lydia had left. It was empty because Evelyn had never truly been there. 20 years earlier, the house hadn't been silent. It had been cracking apart. The night her husband left, Evelyn stood in the doorway, the sound of rain dripping from his coat echoing in her mind like a metronome for the end of everything. Lydia was 9, sitting on the stairs clutching her stuffed rabbit, eyes wide with confusion. Evelyn had tried to keep her voice steady, to smile through the storm, but her lips trembled. "It's just for a little while," she'd whispered, but even then, she knew it wasn't true. The door closed with a final click, and suddenly the house felt cavernous. The kind of empty that no amount of noise could fill. Evelyn had stood there for a long time, staring at the place where he'd stood, her reflection faint in the glass window beside the door. Then she'd turned to Lydia, who was still waiting for an answer she didn't know how to give. That week, Evelyn found 2 new jobs, one in the mornings, one at night. She told herself it was for Lydia, to keep the house, to make sure there was food, to make sure her daughter never felt the absence of love and material things. But love, as it turned out, didn't come in the form of new shoes or a steady roof. It came in time spent, and time was the one thing Evelyn no longer had. Mornings blurred into evenings. She would wake before sunrise, slip into her gray uniform, and leave notes on the kitchen counter. Breakfast on the stove. "I love you." By the time she returned, Lydia was asleep. On the rare nights they shared a meal, conversation was awkward, clipped. Lydia would tell her about school plays, about art projects, about a best friend named Molly. Evelyn would nod, smile, and glance at the clock, thinking of the shift that waited. As the years passed, Lydia's smile faded into something more guarded. At 14, she started spending more time in her room. The door always closed, music playing too loud. Evelyn would knock sometimes, tray in hand, asking softly, "Dinner's ready." Most nights, there was no answer. Then came the night of the shouting. It was a Friday. Evelyn had come home late from the diner, the soles of her feet aching, her uniform smelling faintly of grease and coffee. She opened Lydia's report card at the kitchen table, her heart sinking at the red marks. When Lydia came in, Evelyn tried to speak gently, but exhaustion edged her voice. "You're smart, sweetheart. You can do better than this. Lydia dropped her backpack onto the floor. You don't even know what's going on in my life, she snapped. Evelyn blinked, startled. That's not fair, Lydia. I work. You always work. Lydia's voice broke, trembling between anger and pain. You care more about your stupid job than me. The words struck harder than Evelyn expected. For a moment, she just stood there, holding the paper like a shield. I did it all for you, she whispered. But Lydia had already turned away. The bedroom door slammed, shaking the frame. A second later, music thundered through the walls, angry, defiant, too loud to be ignored. Evelyn sank into the kitchen chair, staring at the flickering light above. The tears came silently, slipping down her cheeks. Mixing with the smell of coffee and soap and fatigue, she wanted to go upstairs, to knock on the door, to tell Lydia that everything she did, the sleepless nights, the aching feet, the double shifts, was all for her. But the words never came. She was too tired, too proud, too afraid of saying the wrong thing. Instead, she sat there listening to the muffled music, feeling the distance grow like a crack in the foundation. Small at first, then widening, unstoppable. The house that had once been filled with bedtime stories and laughter now pulsed with silence and noise that meant nothing. Outside, the rain started again, the same way it had the night he left. Evelyn glanced at the window and whispered to the empty kitchen. I'm still here. But deep down, she knew that wasn't true, not in the way Lydia needed her to be. That night marked the beginning of something quiet and devastating. Not a fight, not a break, but a drift. A slow, invisible unraveling that would carry them both away from each other for years to come. The invitation had been there all along, buried under unpaid bills, grocery receipts, and the quiet shame of procrastination. Evelyn found it one gray morning when she opened her desk drawer looking for a pen. The envelope was ivory, sealed neatly, her name written in Lydia's careful script. Her fingers hesitated before touching it, as if the paper itself might accuse her of something. She turned it over once, twice, then finally tore it open. Gold lettering glimmered faintly in the morning light. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Lydia Carter and Daniel Hayes. The words blurred for a moment as her throat tightened. There it was. The moment she had dreaded and longed for, sitting quietly in her hands all these weeks. The date printed in the corner was close. Too close. Her breath caught when she realized she hadn't responded. The RSVP card still rested inside, pristine and untouched. Kindly reply by the 8th of June. It was now the 24th. She pressed the card to her chest and exhaled shakily. The reason she hadn't answered wasn't forgetfulness. It was fear. Fear that Lydia had sent the invitation out of obligation, not love. Fear that if she showed up, she'd see that same cold distance in her daughter's eyes, the one that had replaced affection long ago. For days she left the envelope sitting on her desk, sometimes glancing at it as she passed, sometimes pretending it wasn't there. It became a silent witness to her indecision. Every time she thought of calling Lydia, her courage withered. What would she even say? I know I've missed your birthdays, your graduations, your plays, but maybe I can still make it to your wedding. It was Grace who finally broke the spell. Her oldest friend swept into the house one afternoon, bringing with her the sharp scent of rain and freshly baked bread. You look pale, Grace said, narrowing her eyes. What's going on? Evelyn gestured toward the desk, the unopened invitation lying there like evidence. Grace picked it up, read it, and sighed. You haven't even replied? I didn't know if she wanted me there, Evelyn said quietly. Grace crossed her arms, shaking her head. You're her mother, not her ghost. Stop haunting your own life. The words stung, but they also lit something inside Evelyn, a small, trembling resolve. That night, she pulled out the invitation again. Her hand shook as she wrote on the back of the RSVP card. Yes, I'll be there. The next morning, she woke before dawn, nerves twisting her stomach into knots. She had no idea what to wear. Her black dress was too somber, the floral one too bright. In the end, she settled on a pale blue dress that no longer fit as well as it once did. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her hair again and again, each attempt only deepening the wrinkles of worry around her eyes. She left later than planned, half an hour late, then 40 minutes. The city traffic was merciless. Cars inched forward in a slow crawl, horns blaring in frustrated chorus. Her phone buzzed with messages from Grace. "Where are you?" Followed by "They're starting soon." Evelyn tried to answer, but her battery blinked red and died mid-typed apology. At one intersection, a delivery truck broke down ahead, blocking 2 lanes. Evelyn's fingers drummed against the steering wheel as rain began to fall, tapping lightly at first, then harder. The windshield fogged, her heart raced. She imagined Lydia at the altar, scanning the rows, not finding her. The thought carved something sharp in her chest. By the time the traffic cleared, the rain had turned into a downpour. The clock on the dashboard mocked her, 11:35. She could still make it if she hurried. She whispered to herself, "Just this once, please." But deep down, she wondered whether it was fate's cruel hand or her own pattern of self-sabotage that had brought her here again. Late, desperate, unprepared. Maybe life was punishing her in the only way it knew how, by letting her arrive just in time to see what she had missed. As the church came into view, glistening through the curtain of rain, Evelyn gripped the steering wheel tighter. Her reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger's, older, weary, haunted. She pressed her lips together and whispered to the empty car, "I'm coming, Lydia. I swear, this time I'm coming." But even as she said it, the bells in the distance began to ring. 2 days later, the rain had stopped, but the world still felt gray. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling beside her. The morning light spilled through the window, soft but indifferent. Her phone buzzed quietly, a notification she almost ignored. When she finally picked it up, her thumb hesitated before opening the app she'd been avoiding. There it was, Lydia's wedding. The photos filled the screen, one after another, bright, beautiful, untouched by anything so human as sorrow. Lydia stood under a canopy of flowers, her smile radiant, her dress shimmering like sunlight on water. Daniel beside her, handsome and kind, his hand resting on hers. The caption read, "The most perfect day of our lives." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She scrolled slowly as though punishing herself. Each picture was a small, exquisite wound. Lydia laughing with her bridesmaids, dancing with Daniel, tossing her bouquet into the crowd. Evelyn's seat in the front row visible in one frame. Empty, a white rose gleaming like a ghost of what should have been. She scrolled faster now. The comments blurred together. "Beautiful bride. A day to remember. So happy for you both." Each word another twist of the knife. Her finger trembled as she reached the end of the album, where someone had tagged Lydia and Daniel in a video. Evelyn pressed play. Music played softly, guests cheering as the couple shared their first dance. Lydia's laughter rang out, pure and effortless. For a moment, Evelyn forgot to breathe. That sound. It was the same one she'd heard through the church doors. The same joy that had broken her in half. Her reflection in the dark phone screen stared back at her. Hollow eyes, the corners of her lips trembling. Without thinking, she closed the app, then reopened it, then closed it again. Finally, she pressed and held the icon until it quivered, and deleted it. Gone. But the ache remained, raw and alive, like a wound that refused to close. The silence that followed was suffocating. No more pictures, no more smiles, just the ticking of the kitchen clock, slow and steady, as if marking the seconds she'd lost. Her phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail from Grace. She pressed play, the familiar voice breaking the stillness. "Evelyn, I saw the photos. You can't keep doing this to yourself. You have to talk to her. Don't wait for the perfect moment, it doesn't exist. Just go. Call her." Evelyn swallowed hard, tears threatening again. "Call her," she repeated softly, the words fragile in her mouth. She stared at the phone for a long time before setting it down. That evening, she found herself at her writing desk, a glass of wine by her hand, a blank sheet of paper before her. She picked up her pen and began to write. "My dearest Lydia, I was there. I know it doesn't matter, but I was there. I saw you walk down the aisle, and you were the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I wanted to come in, to hold you, to tell you how proud I am, but I couldn't. I didn't think I deserved to ruin your perfect day. I've missed so many moments, and I can't ask for forgiveness. I just hope you'll let me try to be part of your life again, even in the smallest way." Her pen hovered above the page, ink pooling at the tip. She wanted to write more, to pour out every regret, every sleepless night spent thinking of all the laters that never came. But the words wouldn't come. They stuck in her throat, trapped between fear and shame. Finally, she folded the letter carefully and slipped it into an envelope. She wrote Lydia's address in her neat, practiced handwriting, then stared at it under the lamplight. It looked so simple, so harmless, a paper bridge between two lives. But when she stood and walked to the door, letter in hand, her steps slowed. She stopped beside the mailbox, her fingers trembling on the envelope's edge. For a long time she stood there, heart pounding, listening to the quiet hum of the street outside. Then she turned around, walked back inside, and placed the letter on the mantel, beside Lydia's graduation photo. "I'll send it tomorrow," she whispered. But she knew she wouldn't. The clock ticked on. The world moved forward, and Evelyn sat in her still house, watching life go on without her. Evelyn didn't tell Grace she was going. If she had, Grace would have insisted she call first, prepare her words, think it through. But Evelyn had thought about it long enough. Years, maybe. The letter still sat unopened on the mantel, yellowing at the edges, and she couldn't bear the sight of it anymore. So she picked up the old cardboard box labeled Lydia's Childhood, brushed the dust from the lid, and carried it to her car. The drive to Lydia's house felt longer than it was. The streets blurred past her window, a collage of quiet suburban order, trimmed hedges, children on bikes, sunlit driveways. Lydia lived in one of those new neighborhoods that looked too perfect, too clean, as if nothing bad had ever happened there. Evelyn's hands trembled on the steering wheel. She almost turned back twice, but then she saw the mailbox with Lydia's name etched neatly across it, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, and her breath caught. She parked across the street and sat there for a minute, palms clammy against the box resting in her lap. The lid wasn't even taped shut. She'd opened it again the night before, running her fingers over the crayon drawings and old letters like they were relics of a life she'd only half lived. Now every piece of paper inside felt like a peace offering. When she finally stepped out and approached the front door, her heart thudded so loudly she was certain the neighbors could hear it. She rang the bell once softly. For a moment there was nothing. Then she heard footsteps, quick and light. The door opened. Lydia stood there, sunlight pooling around her. She looked older, more composed, her hair tied back neatly, a ring glinting on her hand. But her eyes, those same wide hazel eyes Evelyn had once seen filled with wonder, now flickered with confusion. And something else, caution. "Mom?" Lydia's voice was quiet, unsure. Evelyn tried to smile, but her lips quivered. "Hi, sweetheart, I should have called." Lydia didn't move, didn't invite her in. Her gaze dropped to the box in Evelyn's hands. "What's that?" Evelyn looked down, then back up, her throat tightening. "It's yours. Things I kept, drawings, old letters. I missed your wedding, Lydia." Her voice broke. "But I don't want to miss your life." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt fragile, like glass that could shatter with one wrong word. Then Lydia stepped aside slowly, her voice softening. "Come in." The living room smelled faintly of lemon polish and lavender. Family photos lined the shelves, Lydia and Daniel on their honeymoon, at dinner parties, on hikes. Evelyn sat on the edge of the couch, box balanced on her knees, unsure where to begin. Lydia disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 cups of tea. "Thank you," Evelyn murmured. They sipped in silence at first. The ticking of a small wall clock filled the pauses. Every time Evelyn looked up, Lydia's eyes darted away, and Evelyn felt the sting of everything unspoken between them. Finally, Evelyn set down her cup and pushed the box toward her. "You used to love drawing," she said softly. "You drew us all the time, even when I didn't deserve it." Lydia hesitated, then lifted the lid. The smell of old paper and dust rose between them. She pulled out the top sheet, a crayon drawing of 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Her father's hair brown, Evelyn's dress blue, and Lydia in the middle, smiling. Lydia's breath hitched. "I remember this," she whispered. Her fingers trembled as she traced the lines. "You said you'd put it on the fridge." Evelyn closed her eyes. I meant to do a lot of things." The air grew heavy. Lydia pulled out another paper. Her old letter, the one that began, "Please don't miss my play again." The edges were creased, the ink faint, but the words still carried the same ache. Tears slipped down Lydia's cheeks before she could stop them. "I waited for you that night," she said quietly. "I kept thinking you'd walk in." Evelyn reached out, hesitant, her own tears falling freely now. "I know, and I'll never forgive myself for not showing up. But I'm here now, Lydia, if you'll let me be." For a long moment, Lydia just looked at her. Then she set the papers aside and leaned forward, her arms wrapping around her mother's shoulders. Evelyn froze, breath caught, then returned the embrace. Gentle at first, then desperate, as if afraid it would vanish if she let go. They stayed that way, mother and daughter, two hearts mending in the quiet hum of a sunlit living room. The years of hurt didn't disappear, but for the first time, they didn't feel like an unscalable wall. When they finally pulled apart, Lydia gave a small, watery laugh. "You really kept everything?" Evelyn smiled through her tears. "Everything I could." And as they shared that fragile laughter, soft, uncertain, but real, Evelyn felt something inside her shift. The sound of joy that once shattered her heart was now here, quiet and close, healing her one breath at a time. The afternoon light had softened to gold, spilling through the windows and painting the living room in gentle warmth. The box of memories sat open between them on the coffee table, its contents scattered like a small museum of the life they'd both survived. Lydia had stopped crying, though her cheeks were still flushed, her eyes glassy. Evelyn sat across from her, hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of tea she'd long forgotten to drink. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't sharp anymore. It was tentative, waiting. Evelyn glanced at her daughter, heart pounding with the words she'd kept buried for decades. "Lydia," she said finally, her voice soft, trembling. "There's so much I never said. Maybe because I was afraid you wouldn't want to hear it." Lydia looked up, her expression unreadable. "I'm listening now." Evelyn took a breath, steadying herself. "After your father left, I thought if I worked hard enough, if I kept everything together, I could make up for what we lost. I thought love meant giving you everything you needed, even if it meant losing time with you. But I was wrong." She swallowed hard. "Every late night at the diner, every double shift, I told myself it was for you, but part of it was for me too. I was scared, Lydia. Scared of failing you, of watching our lives fall apart. And I didn't see that by trying to save us. I was losing you instead." Her voice cracked on the last words. Lydia said nothing at first, only stared at her mother, her jaw trembling. Evelyn pressed on, tears welling in her eyes. "When you sent that invitation, I wanted to come more than anything. But I was so afraid you'd look at me and see everything I'd done wrong. I thought staying away might hurt less for both of us. It didn't." The confession hung in the air, raw and trembling. Evelyn lowered her gaze. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day." For a long moment, Lydia said nothing. The ticking clock filled the room, steady and slow. Then she took a shaky breath. "You think I didn't hurt you back," she said quietly. "But I did. I punished you, Mom, for years." Evelyn's head lifted, startled. Lydia's voice wavered. "When I was a kid, every time you missed something, I told myself I didn't care. It was easier that way, but I did care. It hurt every time, and I hated how much I still wanted you there. So I built walls. I made it easy for you not to come close." She looked down at her hands, twisting the edge of a napkin. "When I sent that invitation, part of me wanted you to show up, and part of me wanted you to stay away so I wouldn't have to face it all." Tears welled again in Evelyn's eyes, but this time they felt lighter somehow. "We both did what we thought would protect us," she whispered. Lydia nodded slowly, and all it did was keep us apart. The two sat in the fading light, the truth between them quiet and heavy, yet strangely freeing. Finally, Lydia reached across the table and took her mother's hand. "You were late, Mom," she said, her lips trembling with the faintest smile. "But you still came." Evelyn let out a soft, broken laugh, tears slipping freely down her face. "I'll never be late again," she said, squeezing Lydia's hand. "Not for you." The house seemed to breathe again, filled with the soft hum of forgiveness. It wasn't perfect. Too much had been lost to reclaim everything, but something fragile and beautiful had begun to grow in its place. Lydia leaned back, wiping her eyes. "Daniel's been wanting to meet you properly," she said, glancing toward the kitchen. "He's home in an hour. You'll stay for dinner?" Evelyn nodded, her smile small but steady. "I'd love to." They sat together as the light faded completely, the warmth of the moment wrapping around them like a blanket. For the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Outside, the evening settled over the neighborhood, soft and forgiving. Inside, a mother and daughter began, at last, to find their way back to each other. The air inside Lydia's home was warm with the smells of roasted herbs, laughter, and something Evelyn hadn't felt in a very long time: belonging. It was early evening, the kind of twilight that softened the world, turning everything gold at the edges. The table was small but beautifully set, candles flickering in glass holders, the hum of quiet conversation filling the space. Lydia and Daniel moved easily around the kitchen, finishing the last touches for dinner, and Evelyn sat at the table, her heart full, her hands clasped together just to keep them from trembling. It had been months since that afternoon. The box, the tears, the long overdue conversation that had cracked open years of silence. Since then, Lydia had called every few days, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to share recipes, sometimes to ask advice about something simple, like removing a wine stain or baking a pie crust. It was ordinary and miraculous all at once. They were learning each other again, slowly, carefully, like two people rediscovering a forgotten language. "Mom, can you pass the salad?" Lydia's voice cut through Evelyn's thoughts, bright and familiar. Evelyn smiled, handing over the bowl. The word, "Mom," still startled her sometimes. It felt new again, polished clean of the years it had gone unused. Daniel poured wine for everyone, the glasses clinking gently. "To family," he said, raising his glass. Evelyn lifted hers too, her hand steady despite the lump rising in her throat. "To showing up," she added softly. Lydia met her eyes across the table and smiled. A real smile this time. Not the polite, careful one she used to wear, but one full of warmth and forgiveness. The dinner unfolded in the easy rhythm of shared joy. Daniel told a story about burning his first attempt at cooking dinner for Lydia. Lydia teased him back, laughing so hard she nearly spilled her drink. Evelyn listened, laughing too, though her laughter was quiet and trembling with gratitude. The sound of it, their voices mingling, the small bursts of mirth, washed over her. It was the same sound that had once broken her heart outside that church, but now it wrapped around her like a soft embrace. When the plates were cleared and the candles burned low, Lydia put on a record player in the corner. The gentle crackle of vinyl filled the room before an old tune began to play, something slow and sentimental, the kind of melody that carried time within it. Daniel extended a hand to Lydia, and she rolled her eyes, laughing, before letting him pull her to her feet. Evelyn watched them sway together in the small living room, the golden light flickering across their faces, her daughter's laughter, the warmth in her husband's gaze. It was everything Evelyn had once watched from behind a church door, aching to be part of. And now, she was here. Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes, but they didn't fall from sadness. They shimmered instead, catching the candlelight as she exhaled deeply, her chest light for the first time in years. Lydia looked over Daniel's shoulder and caught her mother watching. She mouthed, "Come dance." Evelyn shook her head at first, laughing shyly. But Lydia didn't let go. She walked over, took her mother's hands, and pulled her gently to the center of the room. Evelyn hesitated, then let herself be led. Daniel stepped aside, grinning, and for a moment it was just the two of them, mother and daughter, moving slowly to the rhythm of something more powerful than music. Lydia rested her head lightly on Evelyn's shoulder. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. Evelyn smiled through her tears. "I told you, sweetheart," she said softly. "I'll never be late again." They swayed like that until the song ended, the silence that followed warm and whole. Daniel clapped softly, and everyone laughed again. The room filled with the glow of candles and second chances. Later, as Evelyn stepped outside to breathe the cool night air, she paused at the doorway. The laughter carried out from inside, the same bright, beautiful sound that had once shattered her heart. But now it soothed her, stitched something long broken back together. She looked up at the stars, her lips curving into a small, peaceful smile. "For years," she whispered, her voice trembling with quiet joy, "I chased time, but tonight my heart finally caught up.